Asylum seekers turned away, the backlog at San Diego's port of entry, and how it's impacting a young family from Central America.
I think it's just because the weed makes me feel so much more relaxed and I don't feel rushed.
Buzzed driving is dangerous driving.
Ahead of California's new recreational pot law, the officers bracing for buzzed drivers on the road.
It's a whole lot of fun. I'll try not to dominate conversation way too much, but I guess I think highly of myself in the end. But it's a whole lot of fun.
Coming up, a comic open house hosted by Little Fish. See how this studio helps comic culture thrive in San Diego. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. Asylum seekers from Central America face many obstacles on their journey to the U.S., including corruption and violence. Now they face a new challenge. U.S. Customs and Border Protection has reached capacity at its San Diego ports of entry. KPBS Frontiers reporter Jean Guerrero has the story.
A spokesman for Customs and Border Protection says San Diego area ports of entry are not allowing new asylum seekers to enter for now, due to a backlog in processing. In a statement emailed to KPBS, spokesman Jorge Soberanes said, quote, "At this time, CBP has reached capacity at our facilities at San Diego area ports of entry. We cannot bring additional people into our ports of entry to be processed until individuals already at the port of entry are transferred," end quote. One person who was turned away is Olivia Cáceres, who fled violence in El Salvador with her 4-year-old son. KPBS aired a story earlier this month about her boyfriend, José de Mar Fuentes, who turned himself into U.S. immigration officials last month with their 1-year-old son. Officials separated the pair, sending the baby 1,500 miles away to a shelter in Texas. Cáceres was eager to find out what was happening with her youngest child and tried to cross twice this week, according to her lawyer, Erica Pinedo. Pinedo says officials told Cáceres and several other asylum seekers that they couldn't enter the port of entry.
They said that they'd worked out a system with Grupo Beta, which is the humanitarian arm of the Mexican Immigration Services, to take people away from the port of entry, take them to shelters, and then pick them up and bring them back when there's space.
Pinedo says Cáceres is now at a migrant shelter in Mexico that is working with Grupo Beta and will attempt to cross again at a later date. Cáceres' boyfriend, Fuentes, spent Christmas in immigration detention and remains there. His baby is still in Texas, in the custody of the Office of Refugee Resettlement. Jean Guerrero, KPBS News.
California legalizes recreational pot in a few days, but at Border Patrol checkpoints, nothing will change. Agents will continue to seize marijuana even in small amounts. That's because marijuana is illegal under federal law, and the Border Patrol is a federal agency. A recent federal report shows 40% of all marijuana seizures at Border Patrol checkpoints over a 3-year period were for an ounce or less of marijuana. California's new law allows adults 21 and older to possess up to an ounce of marijuana. No matter what, it will be illegal to drive under the influence of marijuana. Earlier this year, KPBS health reporter Kenny Goldberg looked at the science behind drug driving and the risks involved.
The National Traffic Highway Safety Administration says on Friday and Saturday nights, 1 out of 5 drivers has a drug other than alcohol in their system. The agency says the drug that saw the biggest increase between 2007 and 2014 was marijuana. The National Institute on Drug Abuse says after alcohol, marijuana is the drug most commonly involved in crashes. Even so, some argue marijuana doesn't necessarily make a driver unsafe. Like this San Diego woman. She asked us not to use her name because she doesn't want her boss to know she smokes pot. The woman says marijuana makes her a better driver.
I think it's just because the weed makes me feel so much more relaxed and I don't feel rushed. Because most of the time I feel rushed just because of the nature of my job. But when I'm smoking weed, I can go whatever pace I want to. But
others could smoke the same amount of pot as this woman and feel totally out of it. So where do we draw the line? Researchers at UC San Diego are trying to find out.
So this is the room where we do the driving simulations. We have our participants sit here in this seat and go through a fully interactive driving simulation.
Tom Marcotte is the co-director of UCSD's Center for Cannabis Research. He's involved in a state-funded study that aims to establish when a person is too stoned to drive. People in the study are being given different amounts of pot of varying strengths and then asked to take a spin in the simulator.
We have things where people need to make left-hand turns across oncoming traffic, which requires judgment of time and distance and all of that. And if you go too fast, you'll squeal tires, and if you go too slow, you may be in an accident.
Move to the far right lane and take the freeway exit.
Researchers will be testing participants immediately after they smoke, and then hours later to see how impairment changes over time. Dr. Igor Grant is director of the Center for Cannabis Research.
We're, monitoring blood levels, saliva levels, expired breath, all those kinds of things, and using, not only driving but other kinds of cognitive tests to see how impaired a person really is. I think based on that, maybe we can develop a better indicator of impairment.
The study is just getting underway, so it will be some time before any results are announced. Grant says previous research suggests in modest doses marijuana doesn't greatly increase the risk of accidents. But that's not to say he's encouraging people to drive stoned.
My point is that we don't know the exact criteria to detect intoxication. How long after a person has taken the marijuana are they unsafe to drive? And these are the things we need to answer.
But Scripps Mercy Hospital's Chief of Staff, Michael Seiss, believes any amount of marijuana makes someone unsafe to drive. In his decades of experience as a trauma surgeon, Dr. Seiss has seen too much carnage caused by drug-impaired drivers.
Basically, buzzed driving is dangerous driving. So arguing over amounts right now is probably not the way to think about it. I think all of us should be responsible drivers. Bottom line is, if you're buzzed from whatever, you should not drive.
Kenny Goldberg, KPBS News.
To find out more about the issue of drug driving, just go to our website, kpbs.org. San Diego public transit riders are taking advantage of 2 new ways to pay their fares. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen says buying tickets on smartphones is taking off.
9 months ago, MTS launched Compass Cloud, its mobile ticketing app. Since then, it's pulled in $2.5 million in fare transactions. MTS spokesman Rob Shoup says the early numbers are good.
The goal of this really was to add convenience to our system, attract new riders. A little too early to tell whether that's been successful, but really to make the whole experience just a lot easier for our customers.
6 months ago, MTS launched Compass Cash, which lets riders store virtual money on their fare cards. Riders have loaded more than $300,000 onto their cards, with most of that spent on single rides. Previously, those fares had to be paid for with exact change in cash. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
With the new year comes new laws. Many will directly impact business owners. For starters, statewide minimum wage will go from $10.50 an hour to $11 an hour. It's even higher here in San Diego at $11.50. And California has banned the box, meaning employers can no longer ask about an applicant's criminal history until a conditional offer is made. Employers also cannot ask about an applicant's prior salary. Bill backers say the goal is to help close the gender wage gap, and a law requiring employers to grant 12 weeks of job-protected parental leave has been extended to smaller businesses. San Diego State University business ethics lecturer Dr. Wendy Patrick says business owners should be proactive.
They need to be able to cover shifts of people that want to take advantage of the new legal 12-week maternity-paternity leave, for example. So it's going to take some forethought, some planning, perhaps some financial investment, and one wonders whether that will inure to the benefit of the employer, the employee, or the consumer. So when these new laws come into play, the good news is we know about them at least enough in advance to be able to plan to make sure that if you're a small business, you don't take the kind of financial hit you perhaps would if these laws were unexpected.
And for a full list of new California laws, go to kpbs.org. Mild weather around the county with sunshine and clear skies, which may stick around a while. Erin Calandra has details in tonight's forecast.
Well, good evening. Thank you, Ebony. I hope everyone's having a fantastic night tonight. And it's really not bad out. Temperatures a bit above average. The winds have died down significantly over the last couple of weeks. So things are pretty calm around here. Not much happening across San Diego County as far as precipitation. And that's really the story for much of the Southwest. Things are pretty calm right now. Again, just a little bit warm and pretty calm. So for tonight, our temperature will be 49 degrees. Pretty clear skies and a couple more clouds along the coast as usual. So San Diego, you might see a few. Oceanside staying clear, 37. Ramona, 41 degrees tonight. Alpine, 45. And Mount Laguna, 37 degrees for the low. Thursday, well, it's going to look a lot like today. It's going to stay dry and warm. Really not much happening here. We have a mild flow coming straight down from the north and not much happening. We're not going to see any precipitation, and temperatures are going to stay maybe a degree or two above average. Oceanside 74, San Diego 72 degrees. That's actually a couple degrees above average for tomorrow. Poway up to 82 and Ramona as well. Alpine 79, Chula Vista 73 degrees. Borrego Springs, a nice day, 80 degrees with some beautiful sunshine for you to get outside and enjoy. Along the coast over the next couple of days, it is going to cool down slowly, but still going to be around average. So we start off in those mid-70s. By Saturday, we're down to 71 degrees, and on Sunday, to 67 degrees. Take notice of those lows. By Saturday, they dip down into the 30s, so it will become a bit chilly for our overnights, but plenty of sunshine throughout the day. Inland, we're in the 80s, and then Saturday, we drop down to 79, and Sunday down to 74. Overnight lows not quite as cold. We're in the 40s. Very beautiful conditions. In the mountains, plenty of sunshine, of course, cooler as usual. Our lows are in the 30s as well, and our highs in the 60s, even in the upper 50s on Sunday. Beautiful sunshine to enjoy, and in the deserts, that's the hot spot in the 80s, dropping down to those mid-70s. For KPBS News, I'm Erin Calandra.
Most of the flu cases in San Diego County this season all happened in the past week. The latest county report shows a huge jump in new cases. More than 2,200 were confirmed by lab testing. That pushes the total number of cases this season to more than 3,800. There are 11 flu-related deaths so far this season, 6 in the past week. Most of the deaths have involved people 65 and older. The U.S. government is slashing its contributions to next year's United Nations budget by more than $285 million. In a statement, U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, says this will instill more discipline and accountability throughout the UN system. This comes on the heels of last week's vote by the UN General Assembly denouncing President Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. KQED's Thuy Vu talks to former Defense Secretary Leon Panetta about the United States' role in international affairs.
We have seen protests, some of them violent, over President Trump's announcement this month that the U.S. is now considering Jerusalem to be the capital of Israel. Some experts have warned that this could be an end to the peace process. What is your take on this?
Well, I think it certainly was harmful to the ability of the United States to play a role in negotiations. We have always traditionally felt that Jerusalem ought to be one of those issues that ought to be discussed as part of the larger number of issues to be resolved in a peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. And the fact that the president now is taking that off the table not only hurts our position in terms of being able to negotiate peace, I think it also sends a bad signal to others in the region with regards to their participation in a peace process.
What do you think is the strategy behind making the announcement at this time? It did seem rather sudden.
I don't understand, frankly, what the strategy is here, because all of his national security team, plus the Secretary of State, all urged him not to do this. But he went ahead and did it. Now, obviously, he made a political commitment during the campaign that he would do it. He probably viewed it as fulfilling his campaign promise. But when you become president, there are much more important issues to consider than just whatever you may or may not have said in a political campaign.
Another intensifying situation right now is North Korea, and just about every modern president has been frustrated by the options there. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is now saying that the U.S. is open to talks and negotiations with North Korea without any preconditions. Does this signal a shift in strategy by the Trump administration?
Well, it's hard to tell because Secretary Tillerson will say one thing one day and then the White House will reverse whatever he said the next day. I hope that they do reach out. I hope that we can find a way to sit down and try to resolve these issues. North Korea, without question, represents a very serious threat to our national security.
Mr. Panetta, we talked with you earlier this year, right around the time of the inauguration, and back then you said you had some concerns about Mr. Trump's governing style, but that you would adopt a wait-and-see attitude. It's not about a year later. What are your thoughts on the direction that President Trump has taken so far?
Well, I've been in public life 50 years and worked one way or another with almost 9 presidents. This president has clearly changed the office of the presidency. Republican and Democratic presidents always felt that the presidency ought to be dignified, that it ought to embrace the values of this country, that presidents ought to work to unify this country, not divide it, and that presidents ought to appeal to the best in Americans, not the worst. In addition to that, this president has changed policies that both Republican and Democratic presidents have embraced, whether it's on trade, whether it's with regards to climate change, whether it's involving issues like Jerusalem, whether it's issues involving health care. And the president, in basically disrupting these policies, has not really developed a strategy for how he's going to replace what he's done. So I think the verdict at the end of this first year is that we've had a presidency in chaos. Whether or not it will straighten out, whether or not this president will change in office, I doubt it. That remains the question, because I think the country is becoming increasingly concerned about the direction that we're taking.
Panetta also shared his thoughts on the investigation into Russian influence of the presidential election. You can see more of this interview on kqed.org.
I'm Hari Srinivasan. Tonight on the News Hour, the new tax law and the impact on state and local taxes. We take a closer look tonight, coming up at 7, right after Evening Edition on KPBS.
2017 brought scientific breakthroughs in the field of regenerative medicine. Doctors are using 3D printers and patient cells to create and replace their own organs. Reporter Frank Graff from SciTech Now, North Carolina, shows us how it works.
This lab at Wake Forest University's Institute for Regenerative Medicine looks pretty much like any other lab. Lab coats, microscopes. There's a device to warm and prepare samples. Lots of samples in a tray. And in the back of the lab, there's a machine that looks pretty much like the standard 3D printer. Lots of ink reservoirs and nozzles, a computer to program what's printed, and an automated system that slowly builds a model, layer upon layer. However, this device is anything but your standard 3D printer.
So the strategy is that we take a very small piece of tissue from a patient, less than half the size of a postage stamp. We then expand the cells outside the body, and we then place these cells on cartridges, just like your inkjet cartridge, but instead of using ink, we use cells. And we then print these structures one layer at a time. And as we print the cells, we're also printing the structure that holds it, the glue, if you will. So we create the structure together.
This is the Integrated Tissue and Organ Printing System. What it prints is alive. There are tens of millions of living cells suspended in a gel. There's also a precise lattice work of microchannels, 200 microns wide, imprinted into the system. The vessels allow blood and nutrients to flow through the tissue. The printed organ, made from the patient's own cells, is designed to be surgically implanted back into the patient.
You know, the interesting thing is that you're using the patient's own cells to create these tissues and organs. So basically the body recognizes them and adapts them as their own. Blood vessels and nerves will actually grow into these tissues and they will become functional inside the body.
The framework is a 3D model created from an X-ray of the patient's actual organ. And because each organ has specialized cells, the tissue sample is taken from the specific organ to be printed, and a protocol is designed to expand the cells.
With this technology, you're taking the patient's own cells, and we're using a glue-like substance, but when this gets implanted into the patient, the cells remain, but the glue goes away, and it gets replaced by the patient's own glue. So 6 months later, you're left only with the patient's own tissue and organ.
So far, the research team has implanted into humans flat structures, such as skin, hollow tubular structures, such as blood vessels and windpipes, and hollow non-tubular organs, such as a bladder and a stomach. But those tissues and organs were handmade in the lab, and the customized scaffolds were coated by hand with the patient's cells. What you are watching is research into the future of regenerative medicine. 3D printers that can scale up the process so tissues and organs don't have to be tailor-made.
How can we actually accelerate the production of some of the technologies that we're working on? For example, tissues and organs.
And the future is promising. The new printing system, with its breakthrough technology of microchannels, has created 3D printed muscle and bone that have been successfully implanted in animals. Those microchannels allowed blood vessels and nerves to generate after implementation.
For us, of course, is, all these challenges every day. How do you solve this problem? How do you solve this other problem? So there are always challenges that you have to face and that you have to try to solve. So it's not like there's this one big eureka moment. It's really a lot of hard work that goes behind making sure that these technologies do at the end work.
Tearing down walls on El Cajon's Main Street and building community. The Salvation Army plans on transforming this facility into a new community center. And the $5 million makeover includes plans for a food pantry and a social services center. Kids and families will also have a new gym and youth center. They hope to start construction next year. Little Fish Comic Book Studio on El Cajon Boulevard likes to think of itself as an ambassador for comic books. KPBS arts reporter Beth Accomando says you can find out exactly what that means on Friday when Little Fish holds a comic savvy.
Little Fish Comic Book Studio wants people to realize that comic book culture exists in San Diego for more than the 5 days of Comic-Con. Come inside and let me show you what they mean.
Welcome to Little Fish Comic Book Studio. My name is Alonzo Nunez. I'm the executive director here. Just want to give you guys a tour. This is our classroom right here. We are open all year round for classes, Monday through Sunday, and we do camps in the wintertime and in the summer. Surrounding us is plenty of reference material, which, since we're a comic book studio, takes the form of comic books. We've got our Marvels over here. We've got our DCs on that far end. And in between, we've got everything from IDW, San Diego's local comic publisher, to our Image, our Dark Horse, and a good, healthy manga collection. We specialize in comic book art, but that, of course, integrates plenty of other disciplines or focuses like storytelling, collaboration.
It's always been my belief that San Diego has the best comic culture around. There's always something going on, and trust me, anyone who follows me on Facebook or Instagram knows I'm at some sort of event every single night with some new comic creator, with the art community, with the writers, with different movies, different things. There's always something here that is being created and being cultivated.
So we've got a Comic Savvy, which is a free all-ages event for the community. We're going to have plenty of comic professionals, students, fans, parents are welcome, of course, to stop in, ask plenty of questions about our classes, about our camps. That's going to be this Friday, December 29th at 6 p.m. here at the studio. We're going to have free comics, plenty of comics to rifle through, grab some stuff. We're going to have donuts, sugar to make it through the evening, and plenty of lively discussion about comic books, the new Star Wars film, if you want, and whatever else you want to discuss that's pop culture related.
It's a whole lot of fun. I'll try not to dominate conversation way too much, but you know, I guess I think highly of myself in the end.
So stop by for Comic Savvy on Friday for some geeky fun. Beth Accomando, KPBS News.
Little Fish's Comic Savvy is this Friday from 6 to 9. It's free and open to all ages. A tradition more than a century old is about to be renewed. The famous Waterford crystal ball has arrived at Times Square for the New Year's Eve celebration. Nearly 300 Waterford crystal triangles give the ball its shine. The Times Square event dates back to 1907. Tarana Burke, the activist who created the Me Too movement, has been chosen to carry out the ceremonial dropping for 2018. Now, here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. On Morning Edition, a third California lawmaker has resigned in the past month from the state legislature. How this could change the balance of power in Sacramento. On Midday Edition, taking a bow. The golden voice behind All Things Considered is stepping down. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.